has found himself being hunted by a great white shark, and he caught it all on camera.
The USS Stein did not return from battle in triumph. It crawled back to port, wounded in ways no manual could explain. Its sonar, built to perfection, had failed in open waters, and the hull bore scars that mocked logic itself.
Quite long scratches starting from the front and the side and down underneath the dome itself.
What force leaves steel shredded, yet leaves no witness? For over 40 years, the question haunted sailors and scientists alike. Technology now whispers answers, but they are not comforting. Was it a giant sea beast, as sailors once feared? Or proof that monsters still hide beneath the waves? The wounds no enemy could explain. When the USS Stein pulled into the port of the San Diego Naval Base on a spring day of 1978, something was wrong. Unlike before, it did not make port as one of the most feared warships of the sea. And neither did it arrive as other ships dropping off after patrols. Instead, it sailed in as a wounded ship, with its crew shaken and disturbed. But the damage it suffered was not from an enemy ship or jagged rocks. It was something more. The ship's advanced sonar system, the electronic ears that could detect Soviet submarines hundreds of miles away, had gone completely dead somewhere in the Pacific, leaving the entire ship and its crew defenseless. What happened next would baffle Navy investigators for years. Divers descended to examine the sonar dome, that bulbous rubber-coated sensor mounted beneath the ship's hull. But what they found shouldn't have been possible. The dome looked like it had been fed through a shredder. Over 60% of its fiberglass and rubber coating had been ripped away, exposing the steel beneath. The surface was covered with thousands upon thousands of cuts, gouges, and circular gashes, each one distinct, deliberate, and organic. Navy personnel pulled embedded fragments from the tiers. Under magnification, the fragments resembled hooks, curved, sharp hooks, the kind found on squid tentacles. But squid don't attack warships, and they certainly don't assault 414-foot destroyers built with Cold War steel. Yet here was the evidence, pulled from the wounds themselves, fragments of what appeared to be squid beaks, the chitinous jaws these cephalopods used to tear through flesh. A vessel designed to hunt the invisible had been mauled by something just as hidden, something the crew never saw, never heard, never knew was there until the damage was done. So what kind of creature could do this? And why would it attack a moving warship in the open ocean? When hunter becomes the hunted. To understand why this attack seemed so impossible, you have to understand what the USS Stein was. Commissioned in January 1972, the USS Stein belonged to the Knox class, a fleet of destroyer escorts built for one purpose: find Soviet submarines before they found you. In the chess game of Cold War naval warfare, vessels like the Stein were the knights, fast and lethal, prowling the depths with sophisticated sonar arrays that could pick up the faintest acoustic signature. But this power station of naval warfare had a deeper history that most people did not know about. The ship bore the name of Tony Stein, a 23-year-old Navy corpsman who made single-handed assaults on the enemy to save his unit and also aided several members of his company in 1945. Awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously after his death, Stein became the namesake for a ship that would spend its service hunting threats beneath the surface. When the ship sailed for the first time, its mission had been embedded in its core and its crew. And by 1978, the USS Stein had spent 6 years doing exactly what it was made for: tracking, listening, patrolling the vast Pacific theater where American and Soviet forces played an endless game of cat and mouse. But beneath its might and power, it had a secret weapon. the sonar dome. The ship's AN/SQS-26 sonar dome was its primary weapon, a technological marvel encased in specialized rubber designed to transmit and receive sound waves through thousands of feet of ocean. Built and protected at the heart of the Stein, the sonar dome was capable of probing the deepest and darkest parts of the waters to pick up the faintest sounds. With its fiberglass and rubber skin, sound waves could pass through easily while shielding the delicate sensors from damage in open waters. In plain terms, the sonar dome was the seeing eye of the Stein. Without it, the USS Stein was essentially blind and vulnerable to attacks. Besides its precious eye, the USS Stein on its own was massive. Stretching at an enormous 438 feet from the bow to its stern, it was a sight to behold. With a standard crew of 300 men and displacing over 4,000 tons of weight, everything looked good until that day in March, when it all went wrong. The dome wasn't just robust, it was positioned beneath the hull, away from surface hazards, designed to withstand pressure and impact. Yet something had gotten to it. Something had latched on, torn through the protective coating, and left behind a calling card written in organic hooks and curved incisions. The Stein was built to be untouchable, a predator without peer in the submarine warfare game. But what happens when the predator meets something it never trained for? Something that shouldn't even exist in its world. A silent assault. Danger often comes with a bang or an announcement, but in some cases, it creeps up silently to cause devastating damage. Somewhere out in the Pacific Ocean, the USS Stein tore through the water at its usual speed. But somewhere along its journey, a creature adapted to the crushing pressure of the ocean made a move. The ship was attacked, far from coastlines, far from witnesses. And this is what makes it even more unsettling. When it happened, no one aboard the USS Stein knew it was happening. No collision alarm sounded. No lookout spotted anything unusual in the water. No sonar operator detected an anomaly approaching the hull. The assault took place in complete silence, in the dark world beneath the waterline, where humans cannot see and rarely venture. So when the sonar failed for the first time, that was the first indicator. One moment, the system was operational, painting an acoustic picture of the ocean around them. The next, static. The ears and eyes of the ship had been ripped off, and no one knew why. Another shocking fact was that the Stein continued sailing even after it had been damaged. Some time passed. While it moved silently, something had struck it, and struck it hard enough to blind it without alerting the crew above to any scratches or tremor. But when this malfunction was noticed, actions were taken swiftly. Standard procedure: return to port for inspection. Routine equipment failure, perhaps. A technical malfunction. These things happen often in open seas. But when the divers went down and the lights illuminated that dome, routine became extraordinary. There was not one crack or small chip, but massive damage in more specific points. The damage was massive, violent, and utterly inexplicable. This wasn't a mechanical failure. This was an encounter. The Navy launched an investigation. Marine biologists were consulted. The embedded fragments were analyzed. The conclusion, tentative but unavoidable: the USS Stein had been attacked by an extremely large specimen of squid, possibly a giant squid, or an unknown species entirely. But questions remained, questions that still have no satisfactory answers. Why would a squid attack a ship? What could possibly motivate a deep-sea creature to assault a massive steel vessel producing noise and vibration that should have driven it away? And perhaps, most disturbing, if something this size could damage a warship without anyone noticing, what else is down there that we've never seen? The USS Stein received repairs and returned to service. The damaged dome sections were preserved. The incident was documented, filed away, and gradually faded from public memory. But the scars remained, both on the ship and in the minds of those who saw what something unseen had done to a vessel that was supposed to be untouchable. When the Navy faced the impossible. When the USS Stein limped into port in 1978, her crew carried a secret that would perplex Naval Command and ignite imaginations worldwide. The sonar dome, a critical piece of Cold War surveillance technology, had been ravaged by something in the deep Pacific waters off South America. Over 90 feet of the rubberized surface bore deep gouges, tears, and strange puncture marks. But the most unsettling detail? Whatever attacked the Stein had left pieces of itself behind. The Navy's initial hypothesis seemed pulled from Victorian maritime lore: a giant squid, perhaps even the legendary colossal squid, a creature known more from whalers' tales than scientific observation. Yet, this explanation satisfied no one. Marine biologists immediately raised objections that couldn't be ignored. Cephalopods, even the largest specimens ever documented, showed consistent behavioral patterns. They only inhabited crushing depths, avoided surface vessels, and demonstrated no territorial aggression toward ships. The historical record stood empty of any authenticated squid attack on a naval vessel. Still, whispers spread through the crew and into port cities. Sailors traded theories in hushed conversations. A remnant megafauna from prehistoric seas, somehow surviving in unexplored trenches. Others pointed fingers at geopolitical adversaries, suggesting Soviet sabotage or testing of experimental weaponry designed to disable American sonar capabilities without detection. The tabloids ran wild with sea monster headlines, while intelligence analysts quietly filed reports about undersea threats no one could properly classify. Gradually, the world took on the story of a giant water creature, undiscovered and unnamed, and ran with it. What transformed rumor into legitimate mystery was the physical evidence, fragments embedded in the dome's torn rubber, that would force even skeptics to reconsider everything they thought they knew about the ocean's inhabitants. Anatomy of the unknown. The laboratory analysis eliminated any possibility of hoax or misidentification. The embedded fragments were biological, composed of chitin, the same organic material that forms squid tentacle hooks. But the implications of this confirmation opened more questions than it answered. The hooks measured larger than those from any catalogued cephalopod species. More disturbing was the damage pattern itself. The tears suggested suction force and tensile strength that exceeded documented capabilities of giant squid by orders of magnitude. Marine biologists examining the evidence faced an uncomfortable conclusion. Either the Stein had encountered a cephalopod species of unprecedented size and power, or known species possessed aggressive capabilities never before witnessed or recorded. The supergiant squid hypothesis emerged, a creature perhaps 50 to 80 feet in length, with tentacle hooks proportionally massive and musculature capable of gripping and tearing military-grade rubber designed to withstand deep-sea pressure. Yet one question haunted researchers more than size: motivation. Why would any squid, regardless of dimensions, attack a ship's sonar dome? The prevailing theory suggested acoustic confusion. The sonar dome system emitted powerful low-frequency sonar pulses into the water, potentially mimicking the echolocation signatures of sperm whales, the giant squid's primary predator. Had the creature mistaken the Stein's sonar for a whale, triggering a defensive response? Or had the pulses resembled wounded prey, attracting an opportunistic predator from the abyss? The biological evidence proved something enormous had grasped the Stein's hull. But as investigators dug deeper, other possibilities emerged that had nothing to do with marine biology at all. Shadows and signals. When the Cold War met the deep. Not everyone accepted the squid explanation. In 1978, the Cold War's technological chess match extended beneath the ocean's surface, where submarines prowled and experimental weapons tested the boundaries of physics. Some naval engineers initially suspected material failure. Perhaps the dome's rubberized coating had simply degraded from environmental stress. But that theory died the moment chitin hooks were catalogued under microscopes. More intriguing were the whispers from intelligence circles. Soviet naval research had pursued unconventional weapons for years, including rumored programs focused on marine sabotage techniques. Could the damage pattern have been caused by a remotely operated device designed to disable American sonar, while leaving evidence suggesting natural causes? The theory gained traction among those who noted how precisely the damage targeted the Stein's acoustic sensors, while leaving the hull untouched. Biological camouflage for technological warfare? A plausible situation, yet ultimately unprovable. Then there were the fringe theories that refused to disappear. Throughout the Cold War, both American and Soviet navies documented encounters with unidentified submerged objects, USOS, exhibiting performance characteristics beyond known human engineering. These craft allegedly moved at impossible speeds, executed physics-defying maneuvers, and occasionally left unexplained damage to military vessels. The Stein incident fit an uncomfortable pattern of Pacific Ocean encounters where ships sustained mysterious damage that defied conventional explanation. The truth remained elusive. No subsequent encounter has replicated the Stein's experience. No supergiant squid has been caught or conclusively photographed. No Soviet weapon was ever revealed. The AN/SQS-26 sonar dome sits in naval archives. Its scars and embedded hooks, the only tangible proof that something, biological, technological, or otherwise, rose from the Pacific depths and marked its territory on American steel. The digital autopsy. 40 years after the USS Stein pulled back to port, with its sonar dome shredded, the case file gathered dust in Navy archives until computational intelligence entered the investigation. In the 2010s, Marine researchers partnered with defense analysts to resurrect the incident, feeding decades-old damage photographs and engineering reports into pattern recognition algorithms designed to distinguish biological trauma from mechanical failure. The AI systems had been trained on thousands of documented interactions: whale collisions, propeller strikes, coral reef scrapes, and structural fatigue patterns from metal exhaustion. So when confronted with the Stein's scars, with over 8% of the rubber dome surface carved away in deliberate, repetitive gouges, the algorithms returned probabilities that further confused the already skeptical naval engineers. The damage signature aligned most strongly with cephalopod hook marks. Not the suction cups of common squid, but the curved chitinous talons that Architeuthis ducks, the giant squid specimens measuring 43 feet that represent the upper limit of confirmed ocean predators. This attacker, if the data held true, would have stretched beyond 60 feet, placing it in the realm of sailor mythology rather than peer-reviewed journals. Even more troubling, the AI flagged inconsistencies within the damage itself. Certain lacerations exhibited characteristics that diverged from organic origins: edges too clean, angles too uniform. The models couldn't reconcile these outliers with biological attack patterns, suggesting either measurement error in the original documentation or something the algorithms had no framework to classify. Multiple causes acting on the dome during that March voyage through Pacific waters. The computational verdict arrived without comfort. The Stein had encountered something massive and aggressive enough to assault a warship, yet the evidence refused to resolve into a single satisfying answer. Biology, yes, but perhaps not biology alone. The silence beneath the waves. The AI findings reopened questions that had never truly closed. If something in the ocean possessed both the size and temperament to mutilate military-grade equipment, why had the USS Stein stood alone in its ordeal? The U.S. Navy operates hundreds of vessels equipped with identical sonar domes, crisscrossing the same deep-water territories where the Stein sustained its damage. Submarines probe trenches. Destroyers patrol shipping lanes above abyssal plains. Research vessels drag hydrophones through zones where sunlight surrenders to perpetual darkness. Yet in the decades before and after 1970, no other ship has radioed back reports of tentacled assailants or returned to dock bearing the signature wounds of deep-sea combat. The statistical improbability gnaws at conventional explanations. Either the Stein intersected with an extraordinarily rare specimen, a biological lottery ticket pulled from the ocean's darkest recesses, or conditions that night aligned in ways never since repeated. Location, depth, sonar frequency, the creature's hunting cycle. Variables that converged once and scattered back into randomness. Then there's the matter of the redacted pages. For years after the incident, portions of the Stein's official report remained classified, accessible only to personnel with security clearances that exceeded standard operational briefings. The Navy attributed this to Cold War protocols. Any technical vulnerability, even one inflicted by marine life, warranted protection from Soviet intelligence. Damage to sonar capabilities could reveal acoustic signatures, detection ranges, or material weaknesses exploitable in naval warfare. But there was one thing the Navy did not account for. Classification breeds speculation. And what details required concealment beyond engineering specifications? Did the crew observe something during the attack that transcended biological encounter? Were there instrumental readings, sonar returns, or electromagnetic anomalies that accompanied the physical damage and suggested additional factors at play? The final question cuts deepest into the intersection of human technology and primordial ocean. Did the Stein provoke its own assault? Modern sonar operates at frequencies and intensities that don't exist in nature. These acoustic pulses disorient whales, triggering mass strandings. They disrupt fish migration patterns. Could the USS Stein have enraged a deep-sea predator, transforming a normally elusive creature into an aggressor? The Stein's sonar dome wasn't merely damaged, it was targeted, as though the source of sound itself had become an enemy worth destroying. The answers remain submerged, somewhere between documented fact and stubborn mystery. Scars that endure. The USS Stein returned to service with a reinforced sonar dome, its rubber coating replaced by materials engineered to resist forces the Navy hoped never to encounter again. The ship resumed its mission, hunting submarines, tracking acoustic shadows, patrolling the same waters that had nearly claimed its most vital sensory organ. For 14 more years, the Stein operated without incident, eventually decommissioning in 1992 after a career that spanned Cold War tensions and geopolitical shifts. But the incident itself refused retirement. It occupies a singular position in naval history, the only verified case of a United States warship sustaining combat-level damage from a living organism. Not enemy action, not storm or collision, a creature. Till date, the story persists because it violates the established hierarchy of ocean dominance. Humans command the surface and the depths through steel hulls and nuclear power. We map trenches with sonar, extract resources from abyssal plains, and enforce territorial boundaries across waters that cover 70% of Earth. But the Stein incident whispers a contrary truth, that something down there remains beyond our cataloging, powerful enough to challenge our machinery, elusive enough to vanish back into darkness without further confrontation. Scientists and storytellers both claim the tale. Marine biologists point to it as evidence that deep-sea gigantism may exceed current specimens, that the ocean's unexplored zones still harbor apex predators unknown to taxonomy. Cryptozoologists seize upon the size discrepancies, arguing that the Stein encountered a species science refuses to acknowledge. Conspiracy theorists weave it into Cold War narratives involving experimental weapons, underwater bases, and technology masquerading as biology. The truth, as unsatisfying as it may be, likely resides in the ordinary, made extraordinary by rarity. A giant squid, perhaps driven to unusual aggression by sonar interference, perhaps abnormally large, but still within biological possibility, intersected with a warship during a March night in 1978. The encounter left scars on metal and rubber, and created a legend that balances precariously between documented science and the enduring human need to believe the ocean keeps secrets worth fearing. The Stein's service record may be closed, but the mystery it carried has not. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.